Welcome to Echo, the podcast where we share our personal perspectives on questions about God, spirituality, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm Ryan Becker, your host. No matter who you are, we hope that you find value and encouragement through real discussions about real things. Let's jump in. Echo. Hey guys, welcome back to Echo. I'm Ryan Becker, your host, and I'm really glad you're joining us. Just a quick disclaimer before we jump in. We are recording in the Collegedale Church in Collegedale, Tennessee, and they are going through some renovations and additions right now. So you might hear some construction noises here or there. Just bear with us. We're sorry for that. It's just kind of how life goes sometimes. But today I am incredibly excited because I am joined by two wonderful guests, one of which I went to school with, the other I actually ended up teaching for a year. So really excited to have both of them with us. So let's actually just go ahead and start with introductions. And Isa, we can start with you.
My name is Isa Tavares. I am a communication studies major here at Southern, and I am a great foosballer.
Sweet. Awesome.
Nice.
And then Chris, what about you?
Hi, my name is Christopher Sauve, and I am the associate pastor at Chattanooga First SDA Adventist Church, and I like snowboarding.
Sweet. Awesome. I've never seen like real snow. That's what I
Yeah,
get
me neither.
for being born in Orlando. I've seen it snow, and I've seen snow hit the ground, but not stay on the ground.
True.
So I'm waiting for the day that I can actually throw a legitimate snowball and not like a slush ball that's been like put to the side of the road in the morning or whatever. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to that day one day. So today's topic is an interesting one. It is an incredibly controversial one. And that's why I'm excited about it, because I live in controversy. So this is where I thrive. This is my space. So we're talking about politics, but what I don't want to do, and I want to preface this to the listener and to us here as I set the tone for this conversation. This is an incredibly hard balance to walk, so you might hear some awkward silences or whatever as we try to figure out our own thoughts, the way to communicate those thoughts. But the second thing is, we're not bashing anyone here. The goal is not to bash Trump or bash any candidate or bash any party. The goal is to talk about our own personal lives and how we interact with politics in regards to our faith. So this isn't meant to be a partisan conversation. I don't really care who you follow, because this isn't about that. This is about why we interact and how we interact in general. What are the principles behind that? So just want to give that, just in case anyone thinks they know what direction this conversation is going to go. You probably maybe do, maybe don't, but now you know for sure. So let's talk about this. How, as we as Christians, politics is one of those things where it's really hard not to let your worldview or your values influence your politics, right? You definitely talk about and engage in politics through your worldview. So the question is, what's the line for a Christian when it comes to, and an Adventist, when it comes to engaging in politics? How do we start to think about that? As you know, I didn't care about politics really until I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And so what are kind of the first steps you think as a Christian trying to engage in politics? What do you think are the first kind of principles or things that even you try to keep in mind as you engage with political conversations or voting, any of that kind of thing?
I think that not even just with politics, just being a Christian in general, you always have to keep in mind that you can't just like say whatever you think. Everything that you portray through your actions or your words, that's going to affect someone. So I think that's very important to keep in mind when you're talking, especially about politics, because it's such an emotionally charged topic. I think it's very important to consider how what you're doing is going to affect someone else.
That's a really good point. And I think understanding not just how people treat you, but how your words and actions come across to others, I think that's an incredibly valuable perspective to take and to have. So thank you for that. Yeah, that's a really good point. Chris, any thoughts here?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting when you look at politics, because from a Christian perspective, we're living in this kind of two-city type-esque reality where we have this one focus, but we have to also focus on what's going on here. And so if we begin with that preference, or with that point of view, then that should ultimately, I believe, shape the way we view and how we interact with the political parties that we have here on this earth, which at times it's hard to disconnect. I find it, I mean, because as a pastor, people are always coming up to me and they always want to know, okay, like, what's your stance? Like, are you pro one or are you pro the other? But I think if we start, I mean, I'm jumping already to ideas.
No, that's totally fine. Go for it.
But if we start with this premise that, we have something promised, then that would shape, in my mind, the way that we would interact with politics and the way we would handle politics.
Yeah. So understanding the foundation of where you're approaching from, right? I think a really good example of this, though not in the same vein, but every analogy obviously breaks down somewhere. But when I was pastoring, I actually had a church member. We were sitting at dinner, and he looked at me, and he wanted to know my thoughts on the election. It was the middle of the election year, and he reached out his finger to me, stuck it in my face, and said, "You're not voting for Hillary, are you?" And I knew right then that no matter what I was voting, no matter which direction I was going to vote, that wasn't a conversation I could have, because the way he was approaching it was from a foundation where he was trying to make sure I answered a certain way, instead of actually engaging in a way that valued my own perspective or what my thoughts were. So if I had disagreed with him and I said, "Yeah, actually I am," that would have been an argument. And if I had said, "No, I'm definitely not," he would have said, "Okay, good. That means I still can respect you," right? So there was, and I think there's another aspect to this as well that you touched on, which is when we think about these ideas, it's not just black and white.
Yeah.
It's not pro this or pro that. It's definitely a mixture of things. And as we engage with faith, we understand that our faith is often not black and white, and politics is very much the same.
Yeah.
A lot of things cross over, and a lot of things mix together, and you have to really kind of figure out what you believe. And this is why there are so many different perspectives, because there's as many worldviews as there are people. And in the same way, there's as many political opinions as there are people. Okay, let's then talk about how you approach your faith from that foundation, or from knowing that promise from Jesus. Then, any more insights on or opinions on this? How do we begin those conversations, or how do we begin looking for things to prioritize?
This situation that you went through, it made me instantly think of when the Pharisees would throw a question at Jesus and kind of like word it in a way like, "We want you to answer a certain way." And he would never fulfill that expectation that they had. He always threw a curveball. And then I think that just shows us that picking a side, black and white, like how you were saying, is usually a trap. There's no such a thing. You can't just like pick a side and then stick to it if you're going to be balanced and if you're going to be fair to both sides.
Yeah. I can agree with that. I think the other thing is giving permission for growth and for people to change their minds. I think that's, if we're having our journey and we are not the same as we were 5 years ago, then allowing other people to grow and change and form their opinions over time is incredibly valuable and incredibly necessary. And I think sometimes we say, "Oh, well, a year ago you said this," and we try to hold that against people.
Yeah.
We even do that to candidates. We especially do that to candidates, and we hold it back to the beginning of their career.
Yeah.
And so understanding that this is a journey is a great way, I think, to start having those conversations and to start thinking about where I land on certain issues or topics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, it's one of those things where I find myself picking and choosing from one side. And I wonder, do you ever sit and wonder, which side is really like doing the Lord's will? Because we always kind of have that subconsciously in the back of our mind, whether it's like a superstar or something, or a politician, when they say they follow the Lord, you wonder, like, are they, like, this is going to be the representative. So this is huge. If you think about it, for our culture, for the society of our church, do you ever think that, like, is there a right party or is there a right choice? I mean, because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that if we sat here for a while and talked about it, there's a lot of stuff ethically or morally that we would stand opposed to.
From both sides.
From both sides, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
not just Republican or Democrat or independent. Who knows where they stand? But what constitutes a leader? Because ultimately, we're putting up people in positions of authority. So what constitutes especially for a Christian? What should they look for?
Yeah.
When it comes to that.
And I think in talking about this, understanding that whether you think this is a Christian nation or, it wasn't a Christian nation from the beginning, right? We can argue about that history all we want and probably still get nowhere with someone who's listening to this, because many people have decided what they believe on that, right? So let's just not do that. Let's understand that the leader of this country is not just looking out for Christian values, but he or she is also trying to make life as good as possible for people of all walks of life. And so when I think about that, I think this isn't meant to be a pastor, right? Or a church president,
True.
A world church president. This is meant to be someone who is engaging with multiple backgrounds and multiple lives. So I think, what are the values in my faith that align with the values in other faiths, so that I'm not legislating my faith into their lives, right? I'm not forcing them to live the way that I want to, because ultimately Jesus doesn't force us to do anything. He always gives us that choice.
Yeah.
And I think allowing others the space to make those choices is important. Now, that tends to be where I land on this. Obviously, there is room for disagreement there, but as is my usual response to people when they disagree, you're just wrong. So that's how I handle disagreement. I just assume they're wrong. I'm kidding. Please don't. Please don't actually think of being serious. Isa, any thoughts?
I think that sometimes we forget that our nation and the world in general is not supposed to go in the right direction. Because if it did, would there be a need for Jesus to come back? Everything would be right. So, you know what I mean?
It can't all be perfect and fixed.
Not everything is going to be perfect. So we do need to understand that the leaders that we're going to be electing, they will make a lot of mistakes, and they're not going to be able to fix all the problems that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I mean, change doesn't happen overnight, especially when you're talking about in the U.S., 350 million people. That definitely doesn't. Even the positives or negatives don't always happen overnight in one term or even in one president. So I think that is a valuable perspective to have as well. Certainly, I think you can go too far though on that, and I don't think you are. I'm just saying in general, you can go too far. There are a lot of well-intentioned, well-meaning Christians who think that because Jesus is coming back, they don't have to take proper care of the earth. And so it becomes an excuse for laziness, right? That's the other extreme. And so there's a balance of, we do everything we can to make this world better because we have been given it we're stewards of it. This is home, right? You keep your home clean. Me as a single 25-year-old, sometimes I keep my home clean. But, you do what you can to make life as peaceful as possible. And so there is that line, understanding that, we're trying to get to the bar, but understanding that Jesus is the one who ultimately gets us there is huge. So thank you for that. Okay, so there's another part of this that I want to talk about, and it's how much we let our politics how much we let our politics become our identity. Have you ever met someone who literally all they talk about is politics, all they engage in is politics, and literally their entire being is around politics? I think this is a danger in general to do, but how do you avoid allowing whatever you're passionate about to become the totality of your identity?
I think you need to make sure that you're not allowing your bias to keep your relationships only on one side. Because I do have friends on both sides, and I used to identify very strongly with one of them. And something happened, and then people from the other side that were very close friends of mine were under attack. And I realized that if they hadn't been close friends of mine, I would have probably been together with those people that were doing the attacking. So I realized that it's not just about partisanship. It's about who people actually are, and we can't let their partisanship define that completely.
Yeah.
Something that a speaker said recently here at Southern was that in order to bridge these gaps, we need to have conversation. But effective conversation is not going to happen if you're having it with people who you don't care about deeply and who don't care about you, because there's not going to be that mutual desire to actually get to a point where it's common ground and where you can get to a conclusion.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think social media, while it has expanded our ability to gain perspectives and like to learn about them, it's terrible for debate because you're always debating people you don't know.
That's true.
And you're never gonna, I mean, it's very rare. I think I've had it happen once in 10 years that I've changed someone's mind. And that was even someone that I knew. It's never happened with a stranger, right? Like it's never gonna happen. And so it's, in some ways, I think being more intentional about who we have those conversations with, rather than framing them as arguments or debates. So that's huge. Thank you for that.
I think there's some people who go in looking for a fight too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I know a couple. But I think, especially as Christians, we need to have a reserve, an understanding that, okay, I see what you're thinking. I understand what what's in your mind, and I understand that you're not going to change, so I'm not going to address. But then that also brings up the counterpoint. When is enough?
Yeah.
When do you speak up?
Yeah. Well, and I think, Paul says, if I have not love, then, if I have all these things and I have not love, then what do I have? I have nothing. I am nothing. And so I think when it comes to understanding, or let me put it this way, when it comes to not allowing someone's political opinions, beliefs, or alignment define their identity in your own eyes. When it comes to doing that, understanding that they have value in Christ before they have value in their political beliefs, and regardless of what their faith beliefs are, they could be religious or non-religious. They still have value as creations, right, and as human beings. And so, understanding that first, and remembering that, as you said, these are people. We are people, and we are people first. And I think the other thing that has always helped me in this is, while we may all, regardless of what side we're on, we may all believe that we'll get there different ways. Some people through more fiscally responsible things, others through more social programs and welfare programs, whatever. Everyone wants to make this country better, and understanding the motivations and where they're trying to get also can help that conversation, because instead of then looking for ways to disagree, now I'm looking for ways to agree with them so that we can arrive at the same destination together. So consistently looking for ways that I can agree and affirm where you stand will often allow the other person that I'm talking to drop their guard and to actually do the same. So those are some of the ways that I've learned to engage in those conversations, the perspectives I've taken. So as we close this, kind of, we're winding down here. I want to say this: what have been the most important things for you? Maybe it's something that we've already said, but what have been the most important things for you as you've engaged with politics?
With this situation that I described, it was very eye-opening for me to be removed from the equation and be in the middle, not having to defend a specific side, but just looking at it, having been kind of on both. So I think it's very important for us to realize that we have a bias too. And that in the same way that sometimes we might be thinking, how does this person think this way? But we also have to realize, how do I think this way? Why do I think this way? What makes me think this way? What in my life led me to think this way? And everyone has their own paths, and everyone's in their own journey. And I think it's very important to give other people the same grace that we're giving ourselves.
That's huge. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Chris?
Oh man, I'm reminded of a concert that I went to at Riverbend this past summer. Oh, Riverbend.
You're good. For those that don't know, Riverbend is a music festival that happens in Chattanooga every year. Yeah. So that is context there, but yeah.
John Foreman was up, the lead singer of Switchfoot was up singing his last most famous hit, or I shouldn't say most recent, but a very old hit that he had. And he mentioned that, and I kind of carry the same mentality when it comes to politics, that whenever he's driving down the road, when somebody cuts you off, and that automatic instinct that you have in your mind to just, get angry and want to, say your veggie cuss word, whatever it is, what he said, and this is something that I've kind of started implementing in my own life, is instead of looking at the other person like they are a road rageaholic, don't leave all that aside. Look at them as if they were a child. Think of them as them being, like he said in his own mind, as a child of God. Each of us, we have been purchased by the precious blood of Christ. So just look at each other that way. And especially as Christians, if we do that, I feel like a lot of these wounds that we've been opening up will heal.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it changes the way when you do it that way, it doesn't rely on the other person to change their behavior. It only because you're the only person that you can control.
Yeah.
So if you can control how you view someone else, then it changes how you interact with them too. So both of those are incredible insights. So thank you for that. To our listener, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this. We hope this has been perhaps insightful, encouraging to you, or you've had some new ideas, maybe convicted of some ways you could do things better. I don't know. I know that for me, this has been a reminder to be intentional about the way that I engage in politics. A special thank you to Southern Adventist University and the Collegedale Seventh-day Adventist Church for allowing us to record season 2 of Echo here. And for more awesome content being produced, then you can head over to theprojectrefresh.org and you can check out some other video series that are happening and some other awesome content that is made directly and specifically for you. So thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of this. Isa and Chris, thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Echo. We hope you enjoyed it. To stay up to date with new episodes as we release them, and for more awesome content from Project Refresh, a ministry of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. And don't forget to like and leave a comment.